Again, thank you everyone so much for joining us for our Women's Performance panel. We're going to be talking about managing expectations from society and self, and we have this amazing panel of women here, starting with Aisha Lear, who is a two-time Olympian, has 7 national records, and is recently transitioning into a different stage of her life. So congratulations on retirement. Next from my left, we have Maddie Alm here, who is also transitioning out of professional running. She is also a registered dietitian and has a company called Fueling Forward, specifically working with endurance athletes, and is really passionate about women's health as well. And next up, we have Dr. Kim McConnell, who is a licensed psychologist. She's also an executive manager at Spring Health, which is one of the biggest mental health companies in the world, and manages a team of 90, I believe, right? 90? And is not an Olympian, but a very avid endurance athlete, and fitness, health, and sport is a big part of her life as well. Next, we have Dr. Lara Pence, who is also a licensed clinical psychologist. Dr. Lara runs the Coaches Collective, which is a collective that she's put together. It's set out to empower coaches on how to be more psychologically informed for sport coaches working with athletes, because as athletes, we all know, some of us need the help. Many of us do. And last but not least, we have our lovely moderator, Sara Vaughn, who just was top American at the New York City Marathon. Sarah's a professional marathoner, a mom of 4, and a real estate agent, and total badass. So handing off the baton.
And Chris coaches me. All right, well, I'm going to start off with a question that just gets to the heart of why we're all here. As Dr. Stacy Sims says, women are not small men. We are uniquely and inherently different. So I'm curious, from each of your perspectives, what are the issues and pressures that are unique to women in sports and performance? And if you could offer maybe like a solution to the problem that you see. We could start down with Aisha.
Great. Really hitting the soft questions out in the beginning. I would say there's a lot of performance that we could go into, but I'm not a physiologist. My experience just comes from being a professional athlete for 12 years. And the pressure and expectation that I felt as a female professional athlete was really different than what I observed. My husband was also a professional runner for 14 years. What I noticed is that for me to have the same job, I always had to be more and do more. He could just perform, and he, had fans and whatever, just from like being himself, but didn't really have to go above and beyond. And my experiences as a female athlete is that I have to provide value beyond performance, and that with that comes a lot of pressure and a lot of expectation that I'm not only showing up in the arena, but I'm also having to show up on social media all the time, being present, being available, being likable, and being attractive, or looking a certain way, or racing in a certain uniform, or doing all of these things that provided value to a brand that wasn't just running fast. So I would say that's the biggest gap that I've seen as a professional.
Yeah, and I'm a dietitian, so from the nutrition side of things, as you guys can imagine, there's quite a bit at play. I see a lot for women, both from a lack of research standpoint, I should say, and then also just from societal expectations of women to look a certain way, to eat a certain way, especially when it comes to social media. I see a lot of really poor information put out there targeted towards women, making sure you're eating whole foods, make sure you're eating clean, don't eat too many carbs, make sure you're eating enough to support a cycle, but don't overdo it. And there's a lot of really confusing, conflicting information out there. And of course, nutrition is a really big piece of performance, but there's not a lot of direction towards female athletes specifically. So a lot of it is just sort of general hearsay that doesn't apply to athletes, but there's not a lot of guidance for athletes. So they tend to try to follow what the general population is doing, and that tends to be really detrimental to long-term health and performance. But then when we look at the science of things, there's not a lot of research on female athletes specifically, and a reason why a lot of studies have cited that they don't have female participants is because they can't control for phase of the cycle. Well, we live through that, every single month, 12 months out of the year. So we need to understand what's going on with our bodies, but it makes it really difficult for scientists at this point in time to come up with conclusive results. So incorporating that into research, in my opinion, is something that would be hugely, hugely important for women and for professionals to understand how to help women and make it more specific to performance for female athletes.
And when I think about women who are participating in sport or advancing their careers, I think about all of the roles that we play and the ways that we show up in our families, in our lives, in our work, and the challenge of balancing those things and how sport and your activities can either be a retreat or also really fuel those activities. But I also... That's a challenge, but at the same time, because we are so multifaceted, we have all of these bases for our identity. And so I think when we shift our thinking a little bit and take it from a resilience perspective, we've got so many solid bases to work from that it's a really profound strength that we have all of these identities and facets.
Yeah, I think we've come really far as women, and we can achieve things now that we couldn't achieve 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 years ago. And I think there are so many amazing parts about that. But the thing that I think has become internalized in women where it becomes problematic is I can do it, therefore I should do it. And so I can be an athlete, I should be an athlete, and I should be the best. I can be a mother, so I should be a mother, and I should be the best. I can do the PTA too, so I should do the PTA too, and I should do it best. So I think that, as somebody who really believes that how we do anything is how we do everything, that can become problematic when we begin to internalize that our condition of enoughness is based on doing more because we can. So why shouldn't we? And I think some of that just comes from the ways in which women have become so oppressed. And so when we have opportunity, so many people are take that opportunity, run with it. But we have 8,000 batons in our hand at one time, which inevitably impacts our performance. Solution, I don't know, lots of different solutions, I think. But I think part of it comes with realizing actually the burden that falls on women for constantly having to calculate so much all the time. And I think there's just a lot of work that needs to be done there.
I agree. And we'll dig into some more of that in a little bit. Kim, you mentioned the word balance, which I have a personal vendetta against the word balance because I feel like it implies, what you were saying, Laura, that means that you have to do everything all equally well. And that can be a little tough. But one thing that, that I want to get your perspective on too, all of you, is the idea of that balance and what you do to take care of yourself, if that is your idea of balance. And when was the idea of self-help introduced to you? What does that mean to you? And how has it changed throughout the stages of your career? Should we start with Laura?
Sure. Well, I'm a psychologist, so self-help was day one in graduate school. No, but I think, here's what I think about self-help a little bit, which I think can actually take us out of actually helping ourselves, which is that we have also really become a society where we think that we can get a lot of things from within. Self-help is look inside and it's all within. And, the only opinion that matters is your own. And if you only love yourself, you'll be fine. But that misses our inherent desire and need for connection. And I don't think that women are connected enough these days. So I think that self-help as a concept is wonderful. Like, we should be putting the mask on ourselves before we try and help somebody else. We should be taking time to reflect and ask, like, how can I help myself right now so that I can get something, so that I can get a need met that I need to be met. But I think in that, like, we need other help. We need to connect more with other women, and we need more female friendships. I mean, I think, like, takes a village is a saying for a reason, but in America, like, we don't uphold that very much. And I think we need to uphold that more as females.
Yeah, and when you say self-help, I also think of self-care, with this term, that I object to a little bit, because so many of the things that we talk about being self-care in our society are like, times to pause, which I'm all for pausing, but like going and getting your nails done is fine, but not life-giving, let's say. But what you were saying about like human connection is life-giving. And examining your thoughts and attending to those and being empowered because you have a grasp on what you're thinking and the ability to then change it, that's life-giving. So, like, that is the kind of self-care that I think we're not having conversations about. Nothing against incredible massages, especially really effective sports massages, but I think we may be getting self-care a little bit wrong in our current conversation.
Yeah, I think, speaking as someone who's horrible at taking time for myself, I think that's a good point. And for me, a big thing I've done for self-care is therapy. I think it's really important to take those steps to get to know yourself and have tools to navigate life, because life is stressful. And especially, I see this a lot from a nutrition standpoint. Food causes a lot of stress for people. And I'm very fortunate that I haven't had that experience, but I work every day with people who food is a really time-consuming thing. It's constantly in the back of their mind. It's constantly, going into every single decision they make. How is this going to affect my body, and how am I going to be able to eat later if I do this now? So I think, that kind of goes hand in hand with taking care of yourself. Taking the pressure off of yourself to get it perfectly. Like Sara said earlier, finding balance. I say that all the time as a dietitian. You don't have to get it perfect 100% of the time. Finding a way that it's sustainable to you to get it right as often as you can, but not 100% of the time, and taking that pressure off of yourself. That's something I've worked on in a lot of areas of my own life.
I want to validate everything that everyone said, because down the line I'm like, yes, connection, therapy. Like, I've seen the same therapist for 10 years at this point, which has been life-changing for me. But I would consider myself like a very extroverted introvert, and alone time is really important for me. I connect really, really well with my super close girlfriends, one of them sitting next to me, which is great. We'll go on our hot girl walks and get a coffee and solve the world's problems, or just our own. But I do find that in our society, women are asked to do a lot of things for a lot of other people. And I find that when I am not having to answer to anyone, and I can sit, on the couch in my Costco sweatsuit, spread eagle, and watch The Real Housewives of New York. Like, I have the data of my Oura ring. Like, that is like number one restorative activity for me. And like, I think that there's power in whatever it looks like for you to like feel restored. Like, you don't have to go in the Gwyneth Paltrow guide to wellness to achieve whatever works for you. So I think just keeping that at the center of like whatever feels good to you is really valuable.
Aisha, you just touched on an example that I think you have in your life of connecting with other women. I'm curious for each of you, like, what does bring you life? Like, when do you feel most connected with other women in your community? What does that look like for you?
Well, truly going for a run one-on-one with a close girlfriend, I think, is magical, or a walk or something where you're both not looking at each other, where you're side by side. I think that allows for like greater connection because you're not necessarily thinking about the other person's reaction as much. Like it allows you to really open up. And I find that my closest relationships are usually forged on a run.
Yeah, I think running does bring a very unique aspect to friendships, especially teammates, because you go through hard things together every day, chosen most of the time, voluntarily doing hard things. But also when you're going through hard things, they're still there. And it's someone that you're kind of forced to see more often than you would maybe choose. And as someone who's not good at asking for help or reaching out to people, when you have teammates that you're forced to see every day, it gives you more of an opportunity to kind of check in and open up if there is something that you want to talk about that you wouldn't necessarily have initiated that conversation yourself. So for me personally, a lot of my friendships over my whole life from when I was young until now have come from sport. And I think that's really special and another reason why it's so important for young women to get involved in sports.
I would give work a shout out here. The sort of the depth and the challenge that you are able to go to with the people you work with, and your work has been sport, and so you're even talking about those work relationships. Yeah, exactly. But, sharing those experiences with women, the things that you have to go through, experiencing and celebrating success together at work. We so often think work is a thing we have to do so then we can live our life outside of it. But given how much time we spend in it, it makes sense for us to drop in and really experience that too. So I'd say work.
I would say that, like, I'm racking my brain. I'm like, gosh, what do I do with my girlfriends? I think for me at least, I think less about what I'm doing and actually like the moments where I feel like I'm connecting the most with my girlfriends are when I'm using really vulnerable language and being really vulnerable. So whether that's like on a walk or we're climbing or we're like headed to a movie theater or we're going out to dinner, I think if I'm allowing myself to like truly sink into how I am in that moment and like eliminate words like fine and okay and great and good, like, it's like, let's move away from those and use things that actually make me feel like a human being. So to me, the connection comes in the vulnerability and sort of like what else we're doing is just cherry on top.
I love that. Aisha and Maddie, this question's more for you guys. You were a part of a powerhouse team with, at one point, maybe a dozen really high-performing women with probably varying degrees of ego. And I'm curious, like, what did you guys do proactively to keep the team culture healthy in a group of women that large?
Sure. I guess I'm a founding member of the group. And I think really early on, when it was just two of us, the center of the group revolved around two women trying to be the best in the world at the same event. And something central to that idea is that there isn't a finite amount of success in the world, and her success is my success and mine is hers. And that really that was like truly the biggest base of what it meant to be part of our group. And I think the genuine friendship and sportsmanship that Emma and I showed racing, when she won world championships, I was like coming in second to last with a broken navicular, but was able to like hug and embrace and like be so happy. And like moments where where I've thrived and it hasn't been her day, like she's, equally happy for me. And I think seeing that on a very public, the most elite stage in our sport, I think that attracted specific athletes to want to be involved, is to like see a relationship that you want reflected in your own environment. And I think we've done a good job at scaling that, and maybe Maddie can speak to if she experienced that or if we like totally flopped and it's not true.
It is true. I think I'm in a unique position because I was definitely one of the slowest members, actually maybe the slowest member of Team Boss, which I'm not saying is a bad thing, but it was cool because I really had to learn different things about the sport and had some of the best teachers in the sport. I was really shocked, though, generally how there was not a lot of competition between us. It was very much a cohesive, working together, building each other up environment. I never felt like I was lesser than anybody. No one ever made me feel that way just because my times were slower. And there were strengths I brought to the team that were different from, strengths that Aisha brought to the team. And I think we were all just really good at identifying what each person brought to the team and really appreciating them for that, and not, wishing somebody could be more than they are. And it just felt like a very good place to be yourself, and it felt like a very safe space to work towards goals, to make mistakes, to learn. And I just feel like I totally took comparison out of it, and was able just to compare myself to myself, and that allowed me to grow so much in the sport.
That's awesome. This is for the whole group, and this might be me projecting a little bit in this question, and I'll explain. How has focus on sport and performance affected other areas of your life, for worse or for better? For example, I get the question a lot, how do you do it all? And if I'm truthful, when I have success in running, like the rest of my life is kind of hanging on by a thread. So I just want to be honest about that. And so for you guys, even though sports and performance maybe isn't your main gig, I'm curious, does it enhance the rest of your life, or are you like me and the rest of it's kind of falling apart?
Well, I will piggyback off of what you said earlier in terms of like balance, and that word. I think balance is bullshit with a bow. I don't think we have it. I don't think it's achievable. I mean, even if you like literally think of like trying to balance something, how incredibly difficult it is to actually do. And I think that in any given time, we have to accept that we're going to neglect something, but it's going to be okay. Like there will be a day where my kids will go to lunch with Cheetos and Welch's fruit snacks, and they will be fine. Like that is okay, not a big deal. There will be a day where like I forget to email someone, and that will be fine. I will get to it in 3 days or 2 days or maybe 7. So I really think that like benign neglect is actually a concept that I've leaned into like quite a lot. Sorry to anyone who might be a recipient, but I do think that like there's no possible way, in my opinion, that we can do it all, because high performers often that exist in sport want to high perform it all. They don't want to just like do it. They want to do it the best. So from my perspective, like that concept of benign neglect and just being okay that like at any given time, I am going to neglect something and it'll be okay has actually been really useful for me.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the brain and what it does when it's multitasking, it's actually task switching. It can't do more than one thing at a time. I mean, there are certain things like you can manipulate the pedal in the car and the steering wheel at the same time, but that's because those things have become one act altogether. But you can't parent and ride a bike and be in a meeting at the same time. That doesn't happen. So it's about task switching, and maybe to recover the word balance a little bit, it's just about being okay with task switching and parking one thing briefly. Like, when my son is with me, and I'm a single parent who shares time with my son's dad, and so I have a sense of guilt that when I am out on my bike and he's with me, because I have half of the time that I'm raising him, that I'm taking an hour and a half or 2 hours out of the time with us. I still sometimes make that choice, and I think it's okay. It's not particularly detrimental to him. In fact, it's setting a pretty good example. I think the other thing I'd say is that I've made a lot of good plans on a bicycle. I've made a lot of good decisions. And some of that's been work stuff, some of it's been parenting stuff, some of it's been working through relationship conflicts. So I really treasure that part of my life and how it gives me space to think through and process other parts of my life.
Yeah, I think there was a period of time for me where because I'm a dietitian that works with runners, and then I was also a runner myself, I felt like there were times where the success of my business was going to be dependent on my success as a runner. And I realized quickly that really wasn't true, because as runners and athletes in general, we all have good days and bad days, and being able to continue to work hard through those days and see that it's not always results driven, it's more about the process and kind of stacking days, and every race is not going to be great, but still getting back out there, having the courage to get back out there and try again, and ultimately build towards a bigger picture of success, I think has really been a good reminder that people resonate with that, and that has helped grow my business and been really eye-opening to me as someone who does tend to be perfectionist. Most athletes tend to be that way, but it's been really eye-opening that, again, like I say to the people that I work with, you don't have to get it right 100% of the time, and I can be an example of that now, and I think that helps me resonate more with the people I work with. That helps them understand, what they're doing more, and kind of see that it's okay to get there in different ways. And so that's actually helped me build my business. Failing in the sport has helped me build my business more than succeeding in the sport. And I think that's also been important to me, to have that balance between, training and sport and work and life, because both aren't always going to be going great. So having things outside of those has been hugely important to me, and has allowed me to stay sane when I'm not performing well, and have people there to celebrate when I am.
It would be interesting for me to answer this question in a year, when I've been retired for a year, but something that was sort of like a guiding light for me in my sporting career was that this is a very short, special time in my life. And I didn't feel that I was personally making sacrifices to achieve my goals, but I recognized the difference that everyone around me was. My friendships, my familial relationships, I missed weddings, birthdays, funerals, everything in between. And I always had this in my mind that I'm going to bring, these people on this journey with me, and it's going to be really wonderful. And when I retire, I will be able to repay all of the sacrifice that everyone did for me. So I'm on that path right now. But I will say that I wouldn't be half of the fulfilled, I can't think of a word large enough to portray how grateful I am to the sport for giving me the life that I have now. I'm from a really small town on the Mississippi River, and it's given me my spouse. I got to connect with my entire Jamaican family that I had never met before. Before I became an athlete, I've been able to meet the most amazing people in the world. I've raced in 29 countries and have just had a life that I could have never designed for myself. And so for me personally, the good outweighs the bad. And now I'm just on my redemption tour for all the weddings that I missed along the way.
This is maybe a little bit more for Drs. McConnell and Pence, but I'm curious what tools we could use, or advice you have for someone who's maybe going through a tough time but still wants to put up a good performance. I think you mentioned code switching, or what did you call it when you're switching? Task switching? What's an actual tangible tool that we could use?
Well, I'll start actually with what these lovely ladies talked about that made me think of two things. One, women have higher levels and report feeling guilty more than men do. So to begin with, the beginning of, what you said, we're not small men. But guilt is not a measure that we're doing anything wrong. So I say this to my clients all the time who feel guilt all the time, because women feel guilty all the time, which is guilt is not like a compass that points you in a direction. It's just a feeling. So, and a feeling is not a fact. So those are the two things. Guilt is not a compass, and a feeling is not a fact. Those are the two tools. I mean, there's lots of other ones, but those are the ones actually that conversation made me think of. Because I think so often, for example, it's interesting that we generally as women, don't take action when we're angry, but we take action when we feel guilty. I feel guilty, so I'm not going to do it anymore. I feel angry, I should just be quiet. right? I wish we would take more action when we're angry, because I think that we could get a lot done in really productive ways. And frustration and annoyance are just a watered down version of angry, by the way. But so we can say we're frustrated or annoyed about something, but really we might be angry about it. So I think that, like, for me, that's something that I work with my clients a lot, is just like differentiating between feeling and fact, that feeling is not fact. And then also just remembering that, like, a feeling doesn't necessarily have to be a compass. It's just a feeling. You don't have to do anything about it.
Yeah, and a feeling can also, emotions are adaptive. You know, most of them are hardwired into us, and they are our response to some situation in an environment or some history that we are experiencing related to some new stimulus, something we're encountering now. And they're good information, but we have such an orientation to them in our society that there are certain emotions that are good and that we want more of, and some that are negative that we should be chasing away, even anxiety. But if we get to a place where we change that perspective a little bit and we welcome in or recognize anxiety, there's even research showing that if you can put a name on an emotion, the intensity of the emotion goes down. So being able to name emotions can be really helpful and can facilitate performance as well, because then they become helpers, not impediments to performance.
That's awesome. Wow. Just got knowledge dropped by both of you. That was amazing. I can go back and watch this afterwards, right? It'll be, okay, good. I need to take some notes. Okay, back to the group. And for you, Aisha, in particular, identity in sport, like your self-identity in sport, how that's changed over time. And I know you're newly retired, but I'm super curious if you can tell me what us athletes in the twilight of our career have to look forward to on the other side of retirement.
It's super great. Look, when I started running, I wasn't really that good, and spent probably 90% of my career as an underdog, and I loved that identifier. I'm not sure it's totally that accurate. Like, if I really look, I'm at my stats, like, I was pretty talented, and I just didn't identify with that at all. But that mentality is, like, still with me now. As a retired person, I started a corporate job on Monday that I am totally unqualified for and really excited about. But I still have that, like, little dog in me that's like, yeah, you're gonna prove them wrong. It's like they're not expecting anything from me at all. But I think just that, like, that thread has been with me the whole time, and that doesn't just, like, die when I woke up and, like, my run no longer was what I was being paid for, like, from one day to the next. But I would say my biggest observation as a recent retiree is that I feel like I did everything that I possibly could have done as an athlete. Like, I achieved way more than I had ever set out to do. And I feel like I gave it 100%. So I feel no regret and no unease about retiring. And now I get to, like, step into this world that's so big and it's so expansive, and there's so many other things that I can say yes to that just will fill my cup in other ways that racing in a big stadium can't.
Yeah, well, I'm just curious, how, the question in general is, how has your identity in sport changed throughout your career?
Yeah, so I also recently stepped away from competitive running, and, like, it snowed yesterday and I didn't have to go run. And so it's things like that where I'm like, oh, there can be a little bit more freedom and flexibility, which can be scary but also exciting at the same time. More time to focus on my business, and as somebody who tends to just keep myself really busy and always say, like, oh, when this is over, I'm going to have so much time, and then fill it with something else. It's been nice to be able to kind of shift where my focus has been. And I think for me, what I've learned throughout the sport is I was similar to Aisha, where I was sort of an underdog. I didn't start running until I was a junior in high school. I walked on as a sophomore in college, had no intention of running beyond college, ended up running in 5 U.S. championships in the Olympic trials, and all things I never expected to do. And, then I started a business, which I never expected. So I think the sport, the characteristics the sport gives us, like Aisha was saying, have been really the driving characteristics that have set up my life how it is. And I think regardless of whether I'm competing in running or not, who I am has stayed the same, and the things that excite me and drive me stay the same because of some of the stuff that the sport has instilled in me. So even though I don't identify as an elite runner anymore, I think that being a runner is a great thing because you can be one forever. And that could mean different things in different phases of your life. But it's just a club I'm really proud to be a part of.
I'm highly unqualified to answer this question.
You and me both.
Have you always thought of yourself as an athlete?
I think,
has that ever changed for you, your relationship with that?
Sure. Yeah, I grew up swimming, and that was my sport as a kid through high school. And I had a stint with running, had a lot of injuries, and made a choice to leave that. And I actually had a fair amount of grief about that. It was hard, and it was not just because I couldn't do that with my body anymore, but it was like a marker for this period of time for me. And so like leaving that meant leaving that phase of life too. But what it opened up was I got on a bike, and I can't tell you, it's kind of like more fun. But I'd say the other thing is, don't stop doing new things with your body. I got on a surfboard at 40 for the first time. Like, I started skiing 3 years ago. Like, I think now you guys have more freedom because you don't have to worry about injury in the way you used to. Like, so I think aging and progressing through life opens up opportunities if you seize them to do new things.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And I have considered myself an athlete my whole life, which might be like a misnomer, but I just believe that, like, if you engage in athletics, you're an athlete. So, and I agree in terms of like the autonomy and the freedom. Like, to me, sport is like the coolest thing in the world. I just love it so much. I love my job maybe a little bit more, but I think we can learn so much from moving our bodies about ourselves. And I think it's just such an incredible playground. And like, as adults, we don't play enough. We are just not playful. And if we can like get on a bike and be playful, or go down a climbing wall and be playful, or go like bound around in the mountains, like that to me, I think could be such a vehicle for joy for so many people to have that like autonomy and freedom. So yeah, I mean, I think if you engage in athletics, you're an athlete, and you should call yourself that, and you should think of yourself as that. And we should encourage like more adults to do that.
Okay, last question. One quick top piece of advice for performance and one piece of advice for well-being. These are your areas of expertise, ladies.
Okay, I'll go first.
That was supposed to be easy, sorry.
No, it's fine. Okay, yeah, I know, it's the one thing.
Maybe one thing that you haven't mentioned yet tonight.
Okay, great. I could do that. Values. I think we all need to like look inside and ask ourselves what really matters. I am a huge believer in like working off a values-based system. It's what I teach in my coaches collective. It's what I work. It's like the second session I do with any client I have is help them identify their values. So I think that ties into performance, because if you know what matters to you, then you can begin to ask the question like, okay, so if commitment matters to me, like how is what I'm doing in running right now aligning with commitment? How is what I'm doing with skiing right now aligning with commitment? If family matters to you, right? So then how do you ask the question like, is what I'm doing right now in alignment with family? Like, one of the most profound moments I ever had as a professional was when I was like sort of I wouldn't call it the high point of my career, because I feel like every year is the high point of my career, but at that time I thought it was. And I was sitting in like my office, and I was doing a consult with an adolescent and a family. And at that point I was an expert working with individuals who had eating disorders. So I always ask the question like, what do you have for dinner? What do you do for dinner as a family? Like, what does it look like? Not what's on your plate, but like, are you sitting down? Are you at the table? For me to get a sense of their relationship with food. And at that point in time in my life, I absolutely identified family as one of my values. But it hit me that I was sitting there at like 6 o'clock with another family asking about what they do, and I was not with my family. And it was like this visceral moment where I was like, oh, I'm so out of alignment. So I changed things in my world and like in my professional space and started going home at 3:00 so I could be home when the kids came home from school. Granted, I had the luxury to be able to do that for sure, which I'm so grateful for. But to me, like understanding what matters to you and then working to be in alignment with that. Because if you say that this matters to you over here, but you're doing this over here, it creates this gap. And in this gap is where we find more anxiety and more depression and eating disorders and burnout and alcoholism, and the list goes on and on. So if we can close the gap, that to me, it just allows you to be a more aligned person, and that absolutely impacts performance and well-being. I hit both.
I think I would say get to know your internal world and really embrace it and become friendly with it. Don't consider yourself at odds with what's going on in your mind. Be patient with the thoughts that come. Understand that our thinking is to a large extent automatic, and our job is to decide which thoughts to let continue and let take hold, and which ones to just let pass by. Don't be alarmed by your stream of consciousness, but choose which you want to feed and which you want to give more space to. And then you're empowered to change those thoughts too, but really get to know your internal world and welcome it.
I would say I have two answers. One as a dietitian, one as a runner. As a dietitian, the answer to both is eat more carbs. I'm not even kidding you. I have yet to work with someone who's eating enough carbs, ever.
I challenge you on that one.
I mean, that's what people tell me. And then we look at their day and they're still way off. So I'm telling you, there's always room for more carbs. Carbs are really the key to unlocking performance. They also really control our energy, our brain function, our mood, our hormones, everything. And we need carbs, even for muscle growth and maintenance. It's not all about the protein. We need those carbs. So that's my answer as a dietitian. And then I would say as a runner, stop the comparison. That was something that took me a really long time to unlearn. But if I had decided to choose my path compared to other people, I would never be here today. If I looked at other runners and said, wow, they're all so much faster than me, which when I joined the CU team, they were. Everyone was faster than me. But then I worked my way up to be faster than everyone else. And if I had said, I can't start a business, look at all these people who started businesses, compared to them, I don't know what I'm doing. I didn't, but here I am, and I have this business that I'm so proud of. And body image, too, is a really big one that I see in my work as a dietitian. There are 1,000 ways to get to the start line, and there is no one body type that fits a runner's ideal. I've never had a six-pack in my life, but I've beat a lot of people with six-packs. So I think it's really important to focus on yourself, what health means for yourself, what your goals are to you, not compared to those around you.
My performance tip kind of ties both of what you brought to the table of your values and your internal speech to yourself. Most of my best races came from when I had no thoughts at all. But if I did have a thought, I trained myself to have one thought. And it was asking myself a question that was just a phrase. And it was maximum effort, ? And that's when in doubt was always my question is, am I giving a max effort? And if the answer was no, I went harder. And if it was, I stopped thinking. So that's my little performance tip. And my wellness tip is just go for a run with your friends.
Thanks, ladies. Oh, that was awesome. Okay, anybody out there have any questions? You guys did a good job covering everything. You asked great questions. Anybody? No? Don't be shy. Oh, yeah. Nice.
You were talking about carbs.
Yeah.
How does that relate to perimenopause and menopause?
Yes, great question. Hormones. Yes, so the question was, how do eating enough carbs affect perimenopause and menopause? How might that shift? That's a really great question, and it definitely depends on the person and what they're going through. But carbs produce insulin when we eat carbs. Insulin affects estrogen. So definitely plays a really big role in maintaining healthy hormone levels. Blood sugar balance as a whole is a really big part of mood stabilization and energy stabilization. So a lot of perimenopausal and postmenopausal women experience really big dips in energy. And I think part of that too is the body changes that come with that phase of life can be really uncomfortable and motivate people to try to make dietary changes like eating less carbs, which then make things worse. So I think, it's not always comfortable, especially for women in that phase, because we can see those body changes happen. But again, going by how you're feeling is the most important thing, and women tend to feel a lot better when they eat more carbs across all phases of life.
Well, I just put my mic up, so I guess I'll answer. Chris, the first thing that came to my mind when you said that is like whenever we as humans like move up, we have a tendency to experience imposter syndrome, that like voice in our head that says like, do you belong here? I don't think you belong here. Like, go back down. There's a lot of conversation around like, probably not in your circles, but in my circles, around like, how do we get rid of imposter syndrome? I think imposter syndrome is an opportunity for when that question arises, like, do you belong here? For you to just change the tone. Like, how did I get here? Right? And like, then answer it. Oh, I got here because I worked this hard and I did this and I accomplished this and I'm ready for this and possibility is that and curiosity is this. So I think like, my advice for people who are sort of like taking that next step and feeling that expectation, alongside that expectation, they'll probably feel that imposter syndrome of like, I'm not sure that I belong here and the expectations are so high, I can't meet those expectations. So I encourage individuals in that moment to like use that as an opportunity to ask the question, like, how come I am here? What do I want to do here? And then actually answer the question. Like, don't let the question be the thing that stops you. Actually sort of like get to the root and dig it up. So that would be my advice.
I would say from a performance standpoint, you can't expect yourself to make a big jump without making small ones along the way. So I like to give myself like personal process progress check-ins along the way that help me to like first of all be able to visualize the on-ramp and then like hit the strides on the way.
And I just add, give yourself a chance to pause and observe and take in information before you act. Like if you're moving into a new role and you're leveling up, I think it's really important to not be a bull in a china shop. Like really make sure you understand. If you're taking on a team and you're leading, make sure you spend time with that team to understand before you start making decisions for them.
That was directed at you.
I'm not answering any questions tonight. Okay, well, yeah. I mean, going back to like, I've also said balance is bullshit. I did a whole speech on it one time. For me, it's like, you can't pick something up without putting something down because we're already carrying a lot, right? And so, like I alluded to earlier, sometimes that means that my kids had takeout all week or that I haven't, cleaned my bathroom floor in longer than a week and things like that. And, I have just learned to give myself so much grace and just be okay with it. Like, if you want to call them sacrifices, fine. I don't really like to use that word anymore because that implies that like someone's suffering. Kalia, are you doing okay, honey? She's good. We're good. So yeah, I mean, I'm doing enough. And again, now that I'm post-marathon, I can shift back and like hang out with my kids all week and make homemade dinners and make homemade bagels like I haven't been for the last 3 months. So there's a season for everything. Focus. It's okay for it to take up more space. Give yourself grace. Let yourself be okay with that.
I also think like we need to embrace the words I can't. Like, hey, can you just, I can't, not today. Like, I think that we need to do it in our head more, but also like actually out loud to the people around us. I like barely ever hear a woman in particular say, I can't. And I think it's really like empowering to be able to say that. And I also think it's really important to hear other women say it and to say it ourselves.
And when you do say that, I've never had someone be like, I don't understand and I need you to do it anyway. They say, oh yeah, no, I totally get that. Of course you can't.
Right. Yeah.
I'm going to kill the guy behind you. So sitting behind you is one of my coaches. Yeah, he's going to die. He's going to die. And I like might cry talking about it, but I'm like, gosh, I get sappy about it. But coaching is like such an important role, and like as coaches, you don't realize like how much of an impact you're having on our lives. I had a like nearly career-ending knee injury. I was really never the same when I came back, but I visualized myself as this like world beater. Like I'm going to be great. Everything's going to be good. And it was like very much not good. And I was very much not great. And I really struggled with that. And I was like dropping out of races and like having like, you know, panic attacks and just like feeling like I am failing miserably at all of this. And my coach, Nick, behind you, could see that I was struggling and did a really good job at like treating me like a human being and not just an athlete, and like gave me an amazing book to read, A Man's Search for Meaning. And we like talked about it, and he was just able to like sit with me where I was and just be like, hey, you, first of all, you don't have to do this. Only you do this if you want to do this. And then before all of my races the following year, called me before every race to check in and asked me a question that like coaches don't usually do, which is like, hey, what does success look like for you today? And but like I wasn't allowed to give an outcome. And that was just like probably what got me through like the last 2 years of my career. Thanks, Nick.
I coach high school right now and then have gone through a lot of coaches myself. So I think one of the most important things I've experienced as an athlete and then as a coach is sort of like Aisha said, reminding the athletes that they are important outside of performance. We put a lot of pressures on ourselves. We put enough pressure on ourselves already, and we don't need the external pressure. And I think I've seen coaches pressure be unintentional, of course, but expectations and, you know, really focusing on outcomes can be really stressful for athletes, which is a hard balance to find as a coach when, of course, that's how you're building your program and writing training. So I've just seen from my own standpoint, just reminding athletes that, hey, no matter what happens today, you are still loved, you're still a great person. Who you are doesn't change. If you have a great race, if you have a bad race, it's all the same. And I see you and I see your hard work, and I'm really proud of you regardless. So I think that's something that's really important to remind athletes, and just cultivating a culture of more is not always more, listening to your body. And I think as a dietitian, I would say putting health first over performance, not sacrificing an athlete's health, mental or physical, for the sport, and recognizing when somebody might need to step back or might need help and supporting them through that in a way that's different than how you would support them in the sport itself.
And I would say from like a work and parenting standpoint, respecting someone enough to give them the why, give them the context and the explanation for the instruction that you are giving them. And it also gives them the tools to do it for themselves later. And they're much more likely to deliver in the way that you're asking them to when they understand and this thing has meaning for them.
And I would say, and this touches on what you said too, like really accepting actually how much influence, power, and impact you have, and that you are not just disseminating information, but you are a holder of space for transformation in life, not just in sport. And I think like the coaches that I work with too, which are over there that are unbelievable, like do that. They like hold space for the whole transformation of the human, not just like, I'm gonna give you information today. But you have to recognize that you are in that position. Like you have to acknowledge I have power. Use it for good.
Yeah, I agree. I don't coach, but like Kim said, it's very similar to parenting. And I kind of think the best coaches look at the whole person, and maybe that might require letting go of performance and just like letting them get there, because you're probably already working with highly motivated people anyway. They'll figure it out, but just like caring about them as a whole person and kind of giving them the right tools, but letting them do the heavy lifting. Yes. I'll even share my sourdough starter with you. Thank you guys.